final program in our three-part series that we've been doing with the American Film Showcase. My name is Leon Lazarus. I'm from the U.S. Embassy. And for the past couple of months, we've been doing some programs specifically for creatives in the Caribbean in the TV and film space. And so before this, we did one program on finding business success in independent film. And we've done one on pitching for funding in the film production space. And so if you've missed those two other programs, definitely go on our Facebook and check them out. But today, we're going to be focusing specifically on the television industry. And we have no better people than these two experts with us today. We have with us Cassandra Crawford, who really needs no introduction because she is one of the most famous TV personalities in Barbados. She's a producer and presenter for Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation. She's a radio host, voice talent, master of ceremonies, and singer as well, a woman of many, many talents. And from the US, we have Miss Jill Goldsmith, who is the writer and producer for television, with credits on many Emmy-winning series such as NYPD Blue, The Practice, Ally McBeal, Law and Order, Boston Legal, and Rizzoli and Isles. She's also sold pilot programs to ABC, NBC, and Universal. And prior to writing for television, Jill spent 7 years as a public defender in the juvenile and felony trial divisions of Cook County Public Defender's Office in Chicago. So we're going to have an incredible program for you today. Please let us know where you're tuning in from across the Caribbean. Let us know if you're right here in Barbados or Grenada or anywhere else around the Caribbean. And without further ado, Cassandra, I give the floor to you.
Thank you so much, Leland. Appreciate it. And it really is my distinct honor and privilege to be with you this afternoon. And I want to say a warm welcome to you across the Caribbean. We're happy to have you in the wider Eastern Caribbean community joining us for this in the final series. By now, you should know how to do what you have to do and be successful at it, provided you were around for the first session. And of course, the pitch. The pitch is everything. And as you heard, we are going to have now the opportunity to engage Jill Goldsmith. And this is one of the beautiful things about the technology, that no matter where we are across the world, we can connect and share information. And I think that that is a big part of the foundation for what we're doing here today, because Jill, thank you so much. And I extend my welcome. And I have to say good morning to you in California, because the time is a little different as we are here and just getting into our afternoon, really. But getting back to the way the world has come together through technology now, it also gives so many people power, a power that makes them feel they're all producers of their own little shows, and we're going to get to that. But I want you to give a little more about yourself. I want to hear a little more about your story and what caused you to make that switch from the legal fraternity to becoming a writer for TV. That's an exciting transition.
That's the million-dollar question. Yes, and good morning and good afternoon to everybody. And Cassandra, it's so nice to be here with you today. I especially love speaking to writers and content creators and those who would love to do that around the world and other countries, other places, because I do feel like now more than ever, since I've been in television, the opportunity for more and more people to have their voices heard, to come to the party with more niche perspectives and shows is possible. And that's what we all need. We all need to connect and share with each other. So, I especially love doing programs like this. I started out my professional career as a public defender in Chicago, as was mentioned. And this is kind of interesting because it connects to television, but the first image I ever saw of a public defender was a character named Joyce Davenport on a show called Hill Street Blues, which was a
Ah.
Stephen Bochco show when I was growing up.
Mhm.
And it was really one of the first shows that showed these very thorny characters, like warts and all, as they say, where it's not perfect people like Father Knows Best. There's been an evolution in how we depict characters. And I remember seeing her and thinking, that's what I want to do. I kind of recognized I had wanted to be a lawyer because I didn't know about writing for television and film at that time.
Yeah.
Where I grew up in the Midwest in Illinois and was living in Chicago, for most of my adult life before I became a writer. But her on the show, I don't know if you remember, but she was romantically involved with the chief of police. So cut to years later, I'm a public defender and I'm sitting in the lockup in Chicago with one of my clients who didn't trust me. He thought I was in bed with the cops. Oh, because he had seen that show. And I thought, look at the power of television to plant seeds of ideas into the minds of people. And I always had that, as a concept, really the power of television that comes right into people's homes that really impacts their views of things as being kind of the communal campfire of our time, where storytellers used to sit around the campfire and tell stories about their lives and mythology and all of that helped people to understand things. I always was interested in writing and creativity, and I say this because there may be people listening and watching who feel the same way, but I didn't know how to get from here to there. I didn't know, how does one, first of all, I didn't even know one could write for television as a career because it just wasn't anything that I had heard about at the time. I read about some study that a writer did in Los Angeles where they went up to people randomly on the street and asked, how's your screenplay coming? And something like 92% of the people had an answer, which is a huge, it's very much now in the consciousness. At the time that I was, coming of age, deciding what I wanted to do, that was not the case. Law also moved me, social justice, being able to, speak up for people who wouldn't otherwise have support. But I noticed trials are very much like a story, right? You have your opening statement, you have your witness testimonies, where it's like chess. If they go this way, then you have to go that way with the questions. But really, each witness is a character, and how you're telling the closing argument and telling a compelling story. It's the power of story. Nobody ever won a case by just thumping away at the evidence, like this isn't right. So I had been working on story all along without realizing it. At some point, someone had submitted a script to the public defender's office to look at for legal accuracy. Is this trunk search correct? That kind of a thing. And it was my first opportunity to see a script, and it changed my life because I realized here's this language that I understand that I didn't even know existed.
That in itself is special. So in a sense, like when you fast forward, you must feel as though you're writing reality TV because you come from that background, you are coming from that place.
Well, yeah, someone told me once, you don't need to come up with stories, you need to get rid of them. And I guess to a certain extent, we all do. But yes, and I never write someone's literal story. It's the things that move me, the things that upset me, the things that I thought were, other people would be moved to hear or would be great for them to know about. What is important at the heart of that I can then create a story about. And not everything I write is in the legal or criminal law genre, but for those cases that early experience really gave me a footing. And I say that because all experience is valuable. People come from all kinds of paths and have all kinds of experience and stories to tell, and that gives them the turf to speak to. You don't have to become anybody other than yourself. It really is about finding what you have to say. And then there are ways to work with it, in building a script, in developing the story. But I wound up, because I didn't know anybody in the television industry or film industry, I realized, I was trying, murder cases at the time, heavy duty felonies. I couldn't continue to do that during the day and just try to be creative and write at night. If I wanted to do this, I really had to give myself a shot. And I wound up resigning my public defender job and coming out to LA. I had enough saved to float me for 1 year to see what happened, and then became my magical mystery tour of how does one break into the industry here? How does the industry work? It was really a learning curve for me. And it was really a synchronistic story. And I tell this because I think this principle operates for everyone. There's an explorer, W.H. Auden, who said, when you take a step forward, all manner of things are set in motion in the universe that can come to your aid that wouldn't have happened had you not taken the step. So a lot of times people are waiting for something to come to them. And who wouldn't say yes to a great opportunity that fell into them? But it really does require, and when I've talked to other writers in television or in the entertainment industry, where there's really no linear path, like there is for some other professions, like law. You go to law school, you take the bar. Here, there's no guarantee like that. There's no linear path. All you can do is really perfect your part of the craft, continue to try to work on it, develop your writing, build your portfolio, and then the little synchronistic turns come around where you meet this person or that. How it happened for me was I had gone 6 months. I was feeling, oh my gosh, maybe I need to go back to the practice of law. You feel like you hit a brick wall. You try to take meetings, join a writer's group, take a class, but there was no appreciable progress. I was so depressed because I thought I'll have to call the California bar on Monday. It was a Saturday evening, and I went to get chocolate because I just wanted something to help lift my mood up.
The comfort.
Exactly. The high cocoa content, not like a lower quality store-bought candy bar. I went to this nice chocolate shop near where I was staying. And I was in line with another gentleman, and we had a conversation as we were waiting to get to the counter to, place our respective orders. And I had mentioned, oh, I need chocolate. I'm kind of depressed. And he asked me why. And I told him my tale of woe. I'd been a public defender and I came here to write. Well, what have you written? Nothing professionally because I don't know how to get my foot in the door. He pulled out a card and introduced himself and said, I'm David Milch. I created a show called NYPD Blue. And if you get me a script, I would be happy to read it and give you notes. So it was that kind of, I call it cosmic choreography, that puts you in the right place at the right time that you never could have orchestrated for yourself.
Absolutely fortuitous. Who would have thought that chocolate would have brought you all this goodness and brought us, in turn, all this entertainment, all this that feels so real, and it goes beyond your borders, because I'm familiar with all these projects that you've worked on, the NYPD Blue, the Ally McBeal, the Law and Order, the Practice, we too have seen it. So it is amazing that you were able to go from, taking a leap of faith and stepping out of your comfort zone and doing something that was beckoning to you, that eventually worked out. Yes, through some depression and some wondering, but look at that one moment where a card was shared and you were on your way. And sometimes I've spoken to a lot of business people, and these are the moments that they often speak of. Someone opening that door for them and presenting them with the opportunity to push forward and share. So having said that, it says in itself that the television industry reaches the world. And here in our region, I think that ours has made leaps and bounds in recent years, and people are starting to take it seriously. And so there are opportunities like this where we can learn from experts like yourself. But I want you to give an idea, give us an overview of what the US film industry is like, particularly now, when you compare it with back then, when you started your journey, and the opportunities that are there, particularly through this technology as well, because that has got to make it extra.
Yes, and just to follow up on one thing that you said, I've learned, I think, two key things in that process. One is opportunities come through other people. It's always going to be somebody somewhere that you connect with, the lead to that opportunity, that is the doorway to that themselves, and it's rarely what you think it's going to be. All you can do is try everything you can think of, but it will probably happen some other way yet again. But by preparing yourself and doing your work and being in the mix, you create more likelihood that can happen, and that you can be there to show up when the door does open. So I had to learn about the television industry too when I came through that door. I knew about it generally, but the way that it works in the US, and there are different formats, and now there's more places where shows are airing than ever before. it really used to be the broadcast networks were the whole game. And I don't know if you know the way the broadcast model works. It works with advertising. When television originated, it really originated to sell soap. And the shows were the interstitial material to hold your interest between the commercials. And then it has evolved. People became very devoted to the shows, and that began to build. But still, it's about selling the ad, getting the ad dollars. And the word broad in broadcast speaks to me. It's reaching the broadest audience, right? Then as cable, basic cable, premium cable, streaming, when all of that came onto the landscape, the opportunity for so much more content to come forth arose, and much more specialized niche ways. Content creators and series today don't have to generate the audience numbers that they used to. I mean, when I was writing for some of the shows that you mentioned, we might have an audience of 20 million, or even more in some cases, or close to that. And now you don't need anywhere near that to be considered successful, because they're much more specialized, individualized voices. That's why I think you got a lot of those workplace dramas in broadcast, medical shows, legal shows, cop shows. They were a general location, a general place where a lot of stories could happen through. Now you might have something that's just one person's very original story or take on something. There are dramas that, dramatic series, and then there are limited series, where you're telling a story across one season with a limited number of episodes. It starts and it finishes. It's not ongoing. You have comedy, you have single camera and multi-camera. There's a lot of different, but now that I would say those categories are merging, where you have a lot of comedic dramas and dramatic comedies, and where you used to have, 1 hour is drama, half an hour
sitcom.
Now you can have it reversed. There's all kinds of different formats, arising. But at the core of it, there's a story that's being told at the heart of it all. And in the US, we work off a paradigm that involves showrunners and writers' rooms. And for anybody listening or watching, a showrunner is a term of art that was created in the television industry for the head writer who is running the show. In film, you would say it's been perceived as a director's medium, where they're the ones in charge. The writer writes the script, hands it off. Directors got everything in hand from there. In television, the writer is at the helm, which is why a lot of writers love to work in television, because you have more of
control. Yeah. What about the writer's rooms? You alluded to that. Let's talk about that, how people understand this writer's room setup.
Yes. So and the showrunner may or may not have written the pilot that creates the show. But once that pilot, and we can talk about the process of how the development process, because there's really two ways to work in the television industry. One is writing on a staff of an existing show. Part of the other process is called development, where you're trying to get a show to the place where it can be on the air. And so once you've got that order for the series, they hire writers onto the staff. And the number of writers, it really depends on the series. You could have 6, you could have 10, you could have, somewhere in the middle. Some you might have just a very core group, small group of writers. Other shows might have quite a large staff, but they're all writers. And then you have writers' assistants also who are there helping to facilitate the process. You're breaking story. You'll have whiteboards on the wall, and you either writing that,
like a thrashed out room, bounce the ideas off of this kind of room.
And you're literally breaking the story, which means, there's different levels and layers to it. When you come in at the beginning of the season, you begin thinking through the arc of the season. And then that speaks to what kind of a series is it? Is it purely episodic, where it starts and finishes and is completely self-contained in that episode? Like a lot of procedurals, Law and Order is that way. Is it, serialized, where you're just getting an installment of one story, each episode as you go along? in which case you need to break that across the season to know what portion you're at. But even if you're doing an episodic show, you have to look at what are all the ideas we want to entertain in terms of putting them on our season. Once you've got that season arc, then you begin to go into the individual episodes. What is the A story? There's an A story, which is the heavier main story. What are some character storylines that are happening in every episode? So there's many plates spinning, and the writers are there pitching ideas, breaking the story. One person's at the board or either putting up note cards or writing it. It's a group process that then has to be approved. There's a whole chain of approval, which is the showrunner, the studio, the network, whoever, whatever that chain of command is. At a certain point, that story is signed off on, and whoever is going to be writing that episode then goes off to do an outline. And an outline is a more comprehensive version of what is essentially a beat sheet on the board. The same approval process goes on for that. Eventually you get the green light for the script and you write the script. So that's kind of the holy trinity: beat sheet, outline, script.
How long would you describe this whole process? Because often in our small areas for TV stations, like usually we don't have a lot of time to work with. And so you will find that we will go with the serialized situations where you have a 13-part series, but there isn't often a writer's room. Maybe one or two people may be working on this situation, and we kind of develop it as we go. But based on what you're saying, because as you're speaking, I'm trying to put it within the context of the region as well, so that those potential writers, those potential TV producers watching can see how they can make this work. So you're pointing out that the writer's room gives you the opportunity to spread it all out, the big story, across those 13 weeks, say, for example, and then you go into breaking it down into smaller chunks so you see which character, and we'll talk about character development, which character can hold his or her own, and little stories that can trickle out over the period. Yes, essentially this is what it is.
Yes, and I should point out too that an individual writer can do all of this on your own, right? But this is because of the pace of television, because of the amount of material and story and scripts that need to be put out in a relatively short period. Having the collective helps to facilitate that process, right? Because you have someone writing a script while the room is then back breaking the next episode. So it's an ongoing process in that way. I also think of that beat sheet, outline, script, with the beat sheet being what we do on the board in the writer's room, being the steps to building, to kind of creating a human. I think of the beat sheet as the bones of the story, and an individual writer in breaking story for yourself, you can do it this way. It's, what is the architecture of this story? Then the outline is like adding flesh. You're building out the details, the connective tissue, how the scenes transition to each other, the deeper details of the scenes and the characters. And then when you actually begin to write the script itself, it's like breathing life into it. So it's all part of one evolutionary process for a story. It's just done quite often in television with the collective. And within the writer's room, different people can have different strengths and specialties. Some people might be great with story. They know how to break story. Some people might be great with characters or a specific character that you have. People can have different skill sets, and showrunners, in large part, try to cast their writer's room, meaning they're not going to pick, thankfully, now, maybe in the past it was all kind of a homogenous one type of person. Now it really is varied, and other voices are welcome because people understand how that adds authenticity and diversity and complexity and deepens the stories. So the idea is, when it works well, the whole becomes more than the sum of its parts. It can elevate. And you know how when you say something, somebody else might think of an idea. It's the collective process in, trying to raise the level of story.
That's a real network that you've spoken of there. I'm sure that many of our Caribbean people will tell you that budgets and things like that, time frames don't allow for that opportunity, I wanted you to tell us, to give us an idea of the time frame, because you made it sound like a really smoothly working production line, that writer's room. So what is the time period to break that story, figure out the A story, work the beat sheet, and so on? What is that time period that you're looking at?
Yes, and it really depends on the show and if it's network versus, somewhere else, how many episodes are ordered. In those years where I was doing the series, broadcast network series that went the whole year and had a full season order, you could be doing 22 episodes. And you're right when you say it sounds very organized. Like when you come in at the beginning of the season, you have all the time in the world, it feels like, even though you don't, because the actors aren't back yet for production, the writers are there beginning to work on it. You have, your time carved out for you very nicely. As the season goes on, and there are other like glitches and things to work out that can happen anywhere in the production, time gets very tight. So that by the end of the season, you're sliding into home base. I mean, and literally where I might have had 2 weeks to write an episode early on, I mean, the shortest time I've had 4 days to write an episode in certain cases, which isn't ideal, but time compresses. So when you're starting out, you might have a couple weeks per episode in the room, just breaking the story. Then you might have another, handful of days for the writer to be doing the outline. And then there's time in between where you're waiting to get notes, because the people have to read it to give you the green light, the people at the studio, the network, your showrunner. There may be changes that have to be made. There's a notes process that happens. Then by the time you're launched to write your script, it really depends on the show. You could have 10 days, 12 days, 14 days. It really doesn't get a lot longer than that because it needs to keep moving forward. Okay. But like I said, it can be compressed in it,
Do you sell the shows like a series based on, for example, a pilot, or is it sold on paper so that you've got certain buy-in or interest before?
Yeah, so this is the development process, and this is, you have your idea. There's really 2 ways that you can prepare to be able to sell an idea. One is the pitch. It's a verbal pitch, and you go into the room and you're selling your show. And in order to get to that pitch, you really have to work up what the content would be that would also be contained in a series Bible. And we can talk about those too. But that's kind of a foundational document. It's telling you everything about the show. What would a great logline be? A succinct way of describing it. What is the series overview? What are the highlights of the pilot story? Who are your main characters? What are the arcs of the pilot and this first season? The story arcs, the character arcs. Is there something notable that's going to happen right in the middle of the season, and the season to season pivot? Where does your season end? And, where would it begin the next season? So you can go in and you can share all of that. Now, as a writer, they still will want to read you to know that you could execute that. And that's where your writing samples come into play. What you've written before can be your scripts that your, manager, your agent, whoever is representing you and getting you that meeting in the first place will have sent so that they know you as a writer. Another way of selling a show is to write the script. And then they can read the script and decide, do we want to make this? In some ways that can be good because there's no mistaking what that is. It's written, they see what it is. On the other hand, sometimes everything about the series is not contained in the pilot. The pilot is just the first installment, and there's a whole world beyond that. So then there's kind of a hybrid where you could let them read the script, but also have a meeting to be able to pitch the series beyond that if they're interested, or pitch it to begin with and then leave the script with them so they can see the pilot. So really, there are multiple ways. Pitching it, going in and giving a verbal pitch is a very common way to do it. When you do that, however, it's not often just the writer going into the ultimate buyer. You build a coalition. First, you find a producer who's interested in it, who has a track record. They might have a deal somewhere. If you have a producer who has a deal with Universal, then NBC would be the network that would, is where they would, where they would be situated. There's certain channels that are more favorable for certain producers.
Okay.
Yeah, and then if you have a studio then that is interested, then when you go into the network, you've got your producer, you've got this somebody, a rep from the studio, and you're all going in to sell it. So you're building coalitions along the way. It can happen that it's just a writer sitting with a buyer and they buy it in that case, but you're, you know, kind of building your coalition to give yourself a better shot at someone saying, yes, I want to invest in this, we want to buy this. But it has to be a fully realized world. You have to figure out what the franchise of the show would be. And by that, I mean, what is the story engine? What are we seeing each week to week? You know, if it's a medical show, okay, we'll see, you know, cases and doctors and, you know, their personal lives, and then the stories that come along with the patients. And, you know, what is the business of the hospital? You know, that kind of thing. If it's a mystery, what are we seeing? Well, each week, these detectives are going to be solving one overarching mystery and they get a different piece of the case. Or every week, are they going to be solving one case per, you're figuring out what the story engine is. Which lets people know what it is that we would be watching, because there are different franchises that you could have for this content, and picking out, how do I want this to work? And who are my characters? You mentioned that earlier, because characters are so important in television.
Yeah, we're going to get to the characters, but I want you again to see what advice you can share. Because again, I'm as you speak, I'm putting it all into that Caribbean, smaller space, smaller numbers in each island kind of context. And often what will happen with, like, for example, in Barbados, there is one national TV station. And so a few people are expected to do quite a bit. And there are, you know, there are national obligations that have to be taken care of. So, for example, things like more of the entertainment type programs that demand more, they may get a little less priority, but our audience wants them anyway. So we also want to be able to see more of that in the context of the Caribbean. But the money, the funding, and if you missed it, let me just say, for those of you watching us live right now, remember, we would have mentioned at the start of this broadcast that the previous sessions for the American Film Showcase would have focused on finding business success in independent film production. And of course, there was also a session that focused on pitching for funding with the American Film Showcase. So again, finding the success that we're looking for and the pitch funding is often a huge challenge for us in the region, which is what often kind of puts a fork in the wheel of being able to do what you've been able to do in the US. Like, so what I'm saying is most of the producers will be attached to the national TV station in the particular island, and we want to be able to make the most of the money that we do have to make these productions so that people can see more entertainment and not just documentaries or what we may describe as talking heads, which is the one-on-one interview. So what would you want to say in terms of the importance of building an alliance, or maybe stronger together kind of concept, being a part of an association that may give strength to the funding being possible, so that we can see more independent producers maybe working towards things like this with a national TV station? Hopefully I haven't run on too much.
No.
Okay.
Yes, whatever is most useful for your viewers is great. Because there's different financial models in the US, like with streaming, you know, with cable, it's subscriber based. So you don't have to go through the ad dollars. Say, it's, you know, it depends what the model is for, you know, whoever is buying and producing these shows. But it seems like there's strength in the collective, right? With people pooling resources, you know, both financially and creatively, and beginning to build and develop and evolve scripted, you know, entertainment, if that's what people are wanting to do there. And at the crux of it all really is the script and the story, you know, and the series idea. And as more people begin to create those and build an audience for those, you know, like demand generates more opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So, I can speak to the ways that it happens in the U.S. There are those independent producers and so forth who come into it, but at a certain point, you're seeking to sell that show to one of these cities, right?
Okay. All right. So I want you to go back now to the character development, because that is key. And people become very attached to certain characters, and that may draw them to certain shows. So what can you tell us about the character development part of the process?
Yes, and so much, because characters are so important in television. In television, as opposed to film, people are coming back to it week to week or episode to episode. The clickability factor when something's streaming, where I don't know if people have had the experience where you're up in the middle of the night and you can't help but click on the next one and the next one, and you want
the binge.
Right. Or if you're watching it in a more traditional model, you can't wait for the next week to get the next installment. People become very bonded with these characters and feel very proprietary about them. And if they don't like what you're doing with the characters, you will hear about it, because they're like, that character wouldn't do this or wouldn't say this, or they become like real people who exist somewhere, outside of the screen, and that's a sign that that's a successful character. So the most important thing, and this is true of dramatic works in general. What do they want, and why can't they get it? Because that sets up the inherent conflict in a script. And by conflict, there's all kinds of conflict. Conflict isn't just fighting with someone else. It's conflict within yourself. You want something, you don't know how to get it. Something is happening and you want to change it. You have an idea about something, somebody else disagrees. Setting up the character goals. And then there are needs and there are wants. And those are two different things, because sometimes what a character needs isn't what they want. They might not want the right thing or the best thing for themselves. Sometimes they do. So that goes to the essence of what you can work with in a scene, and a script. Also, stakes. Why is it important for them that this thing happen? Because if someone could make another choice, the stakes aren't high enough. So really locking them into the story. Someone once said the unofficial title of every successful show should be Trapped, that someone is trapped in their circumstance, whether it's a relationship or if it's a comedy or if it's a drama. There's no way out but going through it forward, which builds the stakes, because this must be, solved for them. This goal must be attained. They're not going to give up, given who they are. Then there are ways to begin to think about what is a unique character, because you don't want to have someone who's just like someone we've seen before. There may be certain aspects that, resonate, but you can begin to build on. And I think of it in terms of three categories: goals, flaws, and quirks. And when you've attended to each category, you're helping really to realize a more fully developed character. The goal we just talked about. What do they want? Why do they want it? Why can't they get it? Flaws. What challenges do they have? Perfect people are boring. And also with regard to stakes, I always like to say, and I think I heard someone say this once, it's not good in screenwriting to take your main character into the village of the happy, nice people. Like in life, we would love to be in the village of the happy, nice people, but there's no conflict there. There's no stakes there. Everything is unfolding in a nice, happy.
Story ends without any issue. It's done. It can be done very quickly.
Yeah, so you need that grain of sand, that's helping to form the pearl. And with their flaws, how is that feeding into the story also? It's always nice when the very thing that would be their downfall, that is their challenge or their flaw, is the very thing they need to master in order to meet the challenge of the story that you're telling, because then they're locked into it in that way. They need to address that thing.
And quirks.
The quirks, yes. Yeah. So those are the little personality details that make someone who they are. And I always say you need look no further than real life for that. Like existing in the criminal courts, when I worked as a public defender, you saw 1,000,001 little strange and interesting and beautiful and disturbing, quirks. Maybe it's people you live with or work around or something you've thought of. what are the little, quirks? Is someone a hypochondriac? Is someone like addicted to their caffeine? Does someone always say something in a certain way? Are they superstitious? Like, what are the unique aspects that make you you? And those little details can really help to elevate a character. And also, when you're writing a character, for these characters we've already seen that have been cast and actors are playing them, we can kind of picture them because they've already been embodied. But when you're creating them in your mind, it can help to picture someone you know. Picture an actor or actress who you would ideally cast in that role. Begin to imagine them as a living, breathing person. And that can help you, in getting them up and running. And then as you go, you can find that voice. They begin to take on a life of their own and even begin to guide your creative process. You're like, as you're writing, you're like, I didn't know that character was going to say that. And that's how you know you've really given them a life of their own and you're just keeping up with them.
I think that's very important, especially today. People just want more and they don't want predictable. So a little element of surprise is definitely important. So perhaps you can add to what you've just said as it relates to the character and talk to us about the importance of tone and formats as it relates to the structure of your story and scripts.
Yes, and tone, is a really interesting thing because you can't point to it as a physical aspect of the script. It's not like dialogue or a character name or an action line, but it is reflected through all of those things, right? It is, what is it, a comedy? If it's a dramedy, you want to make sure that it's got humor layered in, with the drama. If you're writing, a thriller, there are certain things that will be expected of that in tone and with that genre. You have to subvert expectation. You have to give us those reveals and those, scares along the way. So are you meeting the challenge of, the tone and the theme and the genre that you're writing? It may even go to the way dialogue is spoken in a kind of noir film. It's very clipped, short, dialogue, that kind of a thing. So, or you could have a very talky comedy, characters could be very verbal or just much more, plain spoken. It really depends on the tone that you're trying to create corresponding to your genre. There's character voice and then there's writer's voice, a writer's voice. So a character voice goes hand in hand with creating a character. Voice isn't just the physical voice. It's what is their perspective? What is their view on things? In a script, you should be able to take the character name off the dialogue passages for your main characters. And I'm not talking about peripheral characters, but the main characters, and still know who's speaking. Dialogue shouldn't be interchangeable. They should have a definite perspective and voice and way of seeing the world that is unique to them, right? And that's what we mean by character voice. How do they talk? How do they think? How do they express themselves? And silence is a form of expression too. There's power in silence too. So you can say it that way. A writer's voice is something different than that because the writer's voice is, how when you hear a certain writer's programs, it's them. They have a
style, kind of like a style.
Exactly, which then permeates the entire script too. So there's different layers and textures, that we're talking about here.
Yeah, all right. So this is important. And again, we're giving you an opportunity to hear from Jill Goldsmith. She has written TV dramas like NYPD Blue, Ally McBeal, Law and Order, The Practice, Boston Legal, and more. And so today you're hearing a lot more about how you can go about getting it right. Clearly, the role of the writer or producer for TV is critical because you started by pointing out the power of these people. It's a lot of power that you have in your hands. It's your opportunity to convey a message, a particular kind of paradigm, whatever it is you want to say. This is your opportunity to let your characters do that for that audience, and they have to believe what is being shared. So the role of the writer, producer, absolutely critical, Jill.
Yes, and in television, when you're on a writing staff, there's many different titles that a writer can have, and it indicates whether you're a newer writer, a lower level writer on staff, like a staff writer, a story editor. And then as you go forward, you can become a producer, a supervising producer, an executive producer. And there may be more producerial duties assigned to you. I say may because it really depends on the showrunner. You do have more hands-on showrunners who really want to handle those things. But when it's delegated, you're learning more and more about that producing process where you may be doing read-throughs with the actors. You may be doing a tone meeting with the director where you're talking about the import of every scene, making sure that you're on the same page. You may be in pre-production meetings for locations and casting and, wardrobe, all the things that go to make, a show produced. And then there's a post-production process where there's editing and they're cutting it together, which is almost a form of rewriting unto itself. So you're really in television, the idea of, how much your duties are, what and how great your duties are as a writer really depends on where you are in that process. When you're the showrunner, it all lands at your desk. The buck
stops there.
Exactly.
We're getting there.
Yeah.
So Jill, I want to also go back to the writing series Bible, because in radio we have something we call a log, and we have that in TV too in terms of the control room. There is a log, and that's considered the Bible. That's what we must follow. So I want you to reiterate the importance of that, so that you have everything in order for your production.
Yes, and a Bible is just, I think they call it a Bible. It's a foundational book. It's a compendium of everything that is important to know about that series. There are examples of certain Bibles which you can access online, which have been made public. If you want to take a look at it, I believe I have seen Grey's Anatomy, Stranger Things. There are different Bibles that you can take a look at if you want to read them for yourself. There are certain websites that will publish those Bibles. And I recommend you do a little bit of online research and find examples and see what you like and what speaks to you. I love to look at examples of shows that I think are top-notch and just to see how those creators conceived of their show. But the DNA of a Bible will contain different things. And it is everything you will need to know when pitching the show. Because it's not enough just to know the pilot. In film, you have one story. It's from start to finish and you're done. In television, there is the series and then there is the pilot, which is the first installment of the series.
Yep.
So television seeks to open doors to story. You don't want to shut them down and finish these avenues. You want to find all these windows and doors that you can begin to tell story through. There's this character, the secondary character. We can go into his life. We can go into her life. This other thing can happen. You're looking for different opportunities for ongoing conflict, drama, stakes, as opposed to trying to resolve everything in the pilot. So first of all, create a log line. And what is a log line? It's a sentence or two, no more than that. If you've gone longer than that, it's not a log line. It's becoming a synopsis. But it's a very succinct way of describing your show. And everything, I would say, in the process of television has a purpose, which is to get to the next step of the process.
Okay.
It's sales. So you want to make it entertaining. It's not just a linear description. You're trying to, kind of spin it in a way that makes people want to read on or hear more about it. After the log line, in a Bible, you would typically have a series overview.
Sorry, Jill, can you just give us an example of a log line? Just a quick example.
I would say, let me see if I have one here. I think I actually have notes on one. For Breaking Bad, since it's the show that people might know, a log line I read for this at the time was, when a mild-mannered chemistry teacher is diagnosed with terminal cancer, he becomes a meth dealer to create a nest egg for his family. And so
either captures your interest or loses you immediately.
That's actually illustrating a principle called bisociation, where you have two things that don't go together. A meth dealer and a mild-mannered high school chemistry teacher, right there. You're like, well, how does that work? I want to see that, you know. And to create a nest egg, it sounds like a kinder, gentler way of dealing meth, you know, creating meth. So you're trying to capture someone's interest with the logline. So what would that be for your project that you're thinking of? To be able to encapsulate it in a sentence or two. The next thing would be the series overview. What is the macro view of this series? And the reason why you need to go from outer to inner, from big to small, is if you start very small and say, well, there's this nurse, immediately the person listening is like, okay, it's about a hospital. And you're like, and she works, you know, with the military in a you know, a war zone. You're like, okay, you're trying to guess what the context is. So just give the context first. What is the macro view of your series? How does it work? Are there any comps? And comps is short for comparables. Is there anything it's sort of like? It should never be exactly like something. And more than just giving the name of the thing, say why it's a comp. Well, it has the tone. It has a similar tone to this kind of series. Or the main character, it resonates in a way like this character does, except in my series, she'll do this. And then you can say what the format is. It's a 1-hour drama, you know, and maybe 10 episodes, ideally 10 episodes a season. And say where you think it would fit best. Well, what would be its ideal home? Well, I think a Netflix would be a wonderful placement for it. Then you go to the pilot story and begin to give us the highlights of the pilot story. You don't need to give every twist and turn and then this happens and then that happens. But it's the highlights of how the pilot will work. What is that main character arc over the course of the pilot? What is the end of the pilot? Quite often at the end of a pilot, there will be an interesting twist that grabs our interest and makes us want to go forward in the series to see what comes next. What is, you know, also we can talk about the story structure within a pilot. I know there's a lot of topics here, but let me just mention, what is the inciting incident? What is the thing that happens that sets everything in motion? What are some main twists and turns in the story? The point of no return, the point at which your character is committed to going forward and has nowhere else to go. The midpoint where it deepens for them emotionally. Maybe they were in it for one reason. Now they're in it for a deeper reason. What are some of the obstacles and complications? What is the big crisis, the worst possible thing that happens? And the final conflict. How does your main character step up to that, meet the challenge? So what I'm talking about it's the hero's journey, basically. You're taking the basic underpinnings of a story and telling that story across the structure of a pilot. And when you tell that pilot story, if you've met all those challenges, someone should be able to know, I get what this story is and how this would work.
Yeah. Jill, there's so many things that we could talk about and that we could still delve further into, but we must get into, you know, talking about the fact that the world is doing just what we're doing here, engaging on platforms like this. They're utilizing social media. You know, the COVID-19 pandemic forced us to find new ways to stay in touch and to keep learning and to keep connecting. And people need entertainment. They need what they need to satisfy that side of them that needs to relax. And it often has come through programming. Much of that programming still comes from the US, but we are working to see how we can share more of our Caribbean stories here as well. And with the help from experts like yourself, sharing how it works that way, but also helping us to open our minds to international opportunities. There may be prospects. Know that the world is really our oyster, and you know, there are fewer boundaries. Yes, again, COVID-19 has impacted the way we do that, or the ease with which we can do that, but the boundaries are not as hard or not as difficult in today's world, because you can create a piece of work and it can be out there. You can share it without having to physically go there. So I want you to talk about, using social media to engage and grow your audience, and certainly all the potential opportunities that are wrapped up in that very same format or platform for producers across the world, including here in our region.
Yes, and what you say is exactly right, Cassandra. With what's happening now, and everybody being able to connect online and Zoom rooms, writing staffs having to work virtually, people can work from other locations. Yeah. We can all be together in a virtual room. So there's more opportunities than ever for people from other places, to join shows in other places, join with each other. There's different ways to use social media. Some writers use it for themselves, for their personal brand, to share a little bit about themselves, to share content, to share their work. It's also used sometimes on shows themselves, where you'll have the writer's room all tweeting or being online at the same time as a show is airing, developing additional content that they can share online that's separate from what you're watching. So I feel like the sky is the limit. Creativity is the only limit with what you can begin to do when we're all connecting. It's interesting because I feel like the way the world evolved, it was all very tribal. You're with your group of people. Am I safe from the other tribe? You needed the tribe to be able to survive. Now the tribe is all of us. We need each other to be able to survive in the world. And I love to hear stories from other cultures, from other people who, that I might not be familiar with what, their stories may be. And I think people crave that, and there is something universal at the heart of all of our stories. So I think that there's a real silver lining in all of this, in that the busyness of the world, how everyone was running around doing this and that has been put aside for a time to really have us think about, who are we? What are we doing? What is meaningful to us? What do I want to do? And I also want to say that life, like a script, requires an active protagonist. That's I didn't mention yet that, like, what's so important in the script is that you have an active main character. Yes, things are going to happen to them and they're going to have to respond, but they need to have the thing that they want, that they're going for. They're making active choices. And really, all of this, all of our entertainment and programs are just a metaphor, an example really of what is going on with us. I believe that's why, in a human way, we connect to that, because we recognize the human journey in that. And when you step forward and proactively do things like write a script, learn about the process of what you would like to do, and you can extrapolate that to other fields too. It's not just writing. That happens to be what my path was. It may be yours. There may be other things too. Taking those active steps, begin to set things in motion, and it may take you somewhere you didn't know, or it may take you exactly where you wanted to go. But being able to access other people and other opportunities virtually, the fact that so much is online, we don't physically have to go to this place or that, makes it so much more attainable in a certain way.
So there is hope and scope and opportunity for us in the region to have that international platform to showcase as well.
Most definitely.
Yes. Now, with that said, now that's real sweet, or like we would say in the Caribbean, that sounds real good, but I'm teaching you a little Bajan dialect there. That sounds real good. But when we put it out there, and I know that your area of specialty was not in terms of copyright for your productions, for your work, but protecting your work has got to be important. When you put it out there, you have to recognize that it becomes very accessible and it's out there in perpetuity. So what can you talk to us about in terms of legal protections? Maybe you can speak from a U.S. perspective. Maybe we can discuss the importance of maybe having unions or associations, again, that can help to cover and guide creative persons.
Yes, definitely. And I have to start by saying, with a disclaimer, I'm not an entertainment or copyright attorney. I was a criminal attorney, which is a different area. But I'm speaking from someone who is a writer and has written material and consulted with people. And it's very important to protect your work and not to take the work of others. Piracy, it's like, the people who create the content deserve the respect of having the proceeds from, in the ways
Absolutely.
from that. And we want to hold that energy and space for creators. In the US, we have a Writers Guild, which writers are a member of, and the companies we work for must be signatories to the Guild in order to hire our services. And that enforces, code of conduct for them and payment schedules and minimums and so forth. The Writers Guild has a registry where you can register your work, and you don't need to be a member to do that. And it's for a nominal fee. You can access their website online and register with the Writers Guild. It's a way of time-stamping your work, having it, be protected somewhere. Under U.S. law, we have U.S. copyright law. Something is presumed copyrighted when you write it, but if you need to take someone to court, if you need to actually have a lawsuit regarding that, you do need to register it with the Copyright Office. So there are different protections you can take. You should always consult with an attorney who practices in the area, wherever you are, however it works in your region, to see what the best way of doing it could be. But that gives you a protection. Now, you can copyright written material. Verbal content isn't copyrighted, right? So also be smart about where you share and how you share your ideas. You must share your ideas with the right people, with the people who have the authority to be able to make that project and take it forward. And then if you've written something, protect it to the extent that you're able to in your jurisdiction. And also understand that there are certain story areas which are open to all of us. You can't say, everything about a public defender's office is mine and I own it. Of course not. Anyone can write about that. But the way I tell those stories, the way I organize those ideas, the way I write the characters, all of that is attributable to me. Somebody can't take that and say that it's theirs, but they certainly can tell their version set in that story area, and there are some shows that you might want to submit a sample script to. Oh, we didn't talk about this. Having the way that an actor auditions and will go and audition, a writer's audition is a script that someone can read. There's two types of scripts. One is an original. In television, that would be an original pilot. There's also what they call a spec episode of an existing series.
Please repeat.
A spec episode of an existing series on speculation, meaning you weren't hired to write it. So, and that used to be the currency of the realm. When I started, you needed a spec script, meaning you wrote a sample episode of an existing show. Because my first script for television was for NYPD Blue, that could serve as my spec also, because that was a show that was on the air. People wanted to know, can you write in the universe of a show that already exists? Can you capture the voices? Can you tell those stories? Because when you're on a staff, that is your job. It's to tell a story in someone else's universe. You didn't come up with the idea. You didn't create those characters. You have to be able to grab onto the tone and the voice and the storytelling realm of that series while still bringing something of yourself to the party that they wouldn't have had you not be there, but to learn how to write in their universe. There's also the original script, which now really is what everyone wants to read, where you're just telling your own original, story. You've created it. And that is nice because it gives you two bites at the apple, right? One, it's your calling card as a writer. They can read you, and that might not be the right project for them. They might not be in the market to buy it, but they like how you wrote. I like how this writer writes characters. I love how the mind works. Maybe there's another project they're good for. Maybe we could hire them on another series. Or the second bite at the apple is maybe they do love that original idea, and maybe they do want to begin to develop it and try to sell it and make it. So an original really gives you more versatility in terms of, what you can do with your script, but being able to write an existing, an episode of an existing series can be great training to show you what it's like. Take an episode, get a script from a series that you love, dissect it, break it down. How are the scenes, how are the scenes structured? Does it have act breaks? Broadcast network quite often will have act breaks. Cable and streaming do not. Look at the template and the structure. How are the characters voiced? Who are scene partners? Who do they have together in scenes?
Yeah.
How do they cut from an A to a B story? How do their transitions happen? Just dissect it, because you learn a lot from looking at great scripts. There are books on scripts you can read too, but there's nothing like reading scripts of the best series. Also, a teaser, like what happens at the opening of a series? Where do you enter the pilot? There's different places to enter. For instance, Game of Thrones. If you watched
Oh.
shows that I know internationally people are watching, or have watched. So the opening scene in the pilot, if you remember back that far of Game of Thrones, none of the main characters are there. It's where the White Walkers make themselves known, and the one survivor of that whole, debacle winds up losing his head, right?
Yeah.
And then we meet the Starks and we meet the regular characters. So the Law and Order, you don't come in with the main characters. It's people going about their business, and somehow they came upon a dead body. I'm talking about for what they call the mothership, the one that I wrote for that was half, cop, half courtroom. And then once the body turns up, then your main characters come in and begin to solve it. So your opening might not even be on your main characters. It may be a flash forward, like in Breaking Bad. We see the scene that's going to come back around later on, because
it's somewhere in the end or somewhere down center, and then it takes you back.
Exactly. It's the circle, because it's giving you a hot button scene up front, something you can grab onto, and you want to think, how did that happen? Like, how did this arrive there? So thinking about where you want to enter is another important thing too. There are different places to be able to enter your series.
I think that these are all critical points, and I know that our people are listening and trying to picture, because that is all a part of it as we speak and share, being able to see it coming together based on what we have here and what we want to do here, the messages and stories that we know we can share here. This is all really about making it better and being able to do it more efficiently and effectively, because all of this will affect the pitch, which if you missed, I want to take this opportunity to remind you that you can check it out on Facebook. You can watch on demand, that you can go to U.S. Embassy Barbados and check out the pitching for funding with the American Film Showcase, U.S. Embassy Barbados, of course. Remember that one was with Envoy Jenna Ricker. And you can also check out the Finding Business Success in Independent Film Production with the American Film Showcase Envoy Cole Sachs. So that would have been the first one. So, that was building up. And here we are today in the final of the series, where you have the opportunity to hear from this amazing woman who has written so much of what we have enjoyed here in this space as well. And the thing is that we need to just take the information and be able to just put it into our context here in the region, take from it what we can, and make it work for us, so that we can put out those stories in the way that we ought to be doing. And I think that is what people want to do. We want to be able to do it and give it that international appeal, so that it appeals to a palette across the world, across borders, and not just for our particular island or region. And that probably has been one of the limitations. I think in film, we are moving past that and making sure that we tell the stories with that international appeal, while not, diluting what is truly us and representative of Caribbean. But we're so intertwined, because many of us have relatives where you are, friends who live there. So the stories can again cross borders, all within the same one. It's just, the way you tell it and choosing the entry point, as you just pointed out.
Yes, and I want to speak to what you just said and say something about universality of story. And it seems like a paradox, but the more specific you are, the more it connects universally. Some people think, oh, I have to be very general in order to appeal to the widest group of people. And then maybe it doesn't land anywhere because there's nothing so specific about it. So by being specific and telling your specific stories, even if that's not exactly how something has been for me or for someone else, I will connect to what is at the heart of that for you by hearing the specific, so it will connect at a deeper level. So don't be afraid to really share your specific truths and stories, and trust that there is something that is human and universal at the heart of them that will connect with people elsewhere.
I think that's critical because, again, that goes back to what you said about the quirks and, and finding the A story. And you have to have something that is special to attract the attention of the audience that you want to keep. So, all of this is critical. Again, today is really aimed at helping you organize yourselves in terms of putting all those amazing ideas down. Jill, to share a little more of the personal story, when you look back at your journey and where you are now, what else would you want to say to people who may be feeling a little discouraged, even under the circumstances that we're all living through right now? What would your words of encouragement be in terms of, going after their goals and dreams and letting those creative juices flow, even in the most difficult of times?
Yes, I would say nothing is wasted. None of your experience is wasted. All these roads that you may have been down at some point can merge into a superhighway where everything is necessary and needed. I remember, when I was a public defender, mired in all these cases and, human drama with these high stakes and trying to do right by my clients. And in the middle of all of that, just feeling overwhelmed by it. But now I understand that all of that was necessary because it informed me. It helped evolve my understanding of how you can receive guidance. Like there were unknowable things, like, do I make this decision or that decision? Do we work out a plea? Do I take this case to trial? Do I call this witness? You're making your best, guess, educated guess, with your best judgment, but someone's life and liberty is on the line. How do you begin to do that? You begin listening to your intuition and getting a feeling about, my gut is just telling me this. Like, really begin to listen to yourself. And I feel like that's another benefit of this time when we're kind of given a time out from the busyness of the world and spend more time with ourselves. We have the time to really listen and really feel into things and understand everything that we've pursued, everything that is lit up in us for something is for a reason. And how do I find the way to express that, to pull all these things together? And you'll be thinking of things you never thought would come into play, and all of a sudden, here it is. I remember this thing, and now I have a place for it in story, and if it's not being a writer, it'll be something else. Your intuition will flow regarding that. But just understand that nothing is a mistake that is helping to evolve and educate you and help give you wisdom, right? And draw from that and see that is your strength. You don't have to make yourself into something or somebody else. I want to tell a quick story about, I heard a conversation at the Writers Guild where Jim Sheridan, an Irish director, spoke, and someone asked him the question, do you believe there are only 7 stories? How like people will say, there's only a certain number of stories in the world, and, we're just repeating them in different iterations. And he said, no, and I expect him to say, there are unlimited, when you say no, he goes, no, there's only one story. The story that you've come to tell. It's the story that your soul is dying to tell, that you feel primed to tell, that is of you. And in fact, even in the US television industry, when you're pitching an idea, they want to know, why are you the only writer to tell this? Why can't we take this general idea and change it a little bit and give it to one of the usual suspects? Why are you the one? So having a direct connection to your story, and it doesn't have to be, I was that, right? But what do you love about it? Why are you so drawn to tell this story? It gives an authenticity to it. So really pay attention to who you are. Peel up all the layers of social conditioning. Go back to what it is that really lights you up, that really connects you, because it's going to connect to someone else too. That's just the way it works, you know?
Yeah, well, further to that, I want to take a comment here from one of our viewers from St. Lucia. But since you mentioned about connecting, I want to go back to the moment that was your defining moment, your making something happen moment, where you got that card when you felt depressed, you went out to get the chocolate, and you happened to meet the right person at the right time who could connect some dots for you. If someone from this part of the world, our region, the Caribbean, wanted to make those inroads, what would be the best way to go? Because I mean, we're looking at hope and potential, and that's ultimately where most people would like to be able to share their stories. Yes, we want to have it here in the region, but we also want people across the world to be aware. So what would you say would be the best way to make a connection that is strong and has the potential to develop?
Yes, and there are different pathways to this answer. One answer could be, you know, how it would work where you are and how your industry works if there were someone there who was interested in writing for the US market. The key thing is, first of all, if you want to be a writer, you have to write. You have to have a portfolio of material. So the first step would be to do that, to write the scripts, to learn, you know, the template of scripts, what you want to say, have your writing samples. And then because now we're all on Zoom anyway, and writers give each other staffing boosts online. They're supporting, saying, I recommend this writer. Writers have stepped up, you know, to support each other in ways that didn't used to happen. There's been some different things happening here between agents and writers, so that a lot of writers now are more independent than ever, and are, instead of everybody being off in their silos, are coming together. So begin to reach out to people to say, I live here in this part of the world. I'm a writer. I have these stories. I'm interested in doing this. What advice would you have for me? And I feel like people are more open than ever to be able to be inclusive and help and give opportunities. But the key thing is to be ready when that opportunity comes, because I always say, if I didn't go write the script to be able to hand to David Milch, he wouldn't have had the tool by which to bring me into the industry. It would have been just a nice conversation. I had to give him the means by which to be able to read what I wrote and say, I want to make this show. I want to give this writer an opportunity. And what I did after meeting him, because I didn't know NYPD Blue well enough to go write a script for it at the time, and things weren't airing all the time, or you weren't able to pull them up online. I went, here we have, it's called the Paley Center now. At the time, it was called the Museum of Television, where you could go and check out episodes of shows. And I watched episode after episode. I took a notebook. I began outlining it, breaking it down scene by scene, character by character, until I felt like I knew the template of the show. And then told my stories, you know, wrote us through that template.
Based on that template.
Yes. So dissect the template of, if you love to write drama, what are your favorite shows? What would you like? What area would you like to write in? Dissect those shows. Really learn the template. There might be some books, you know, that speak to you on screenwriting. You know, whatever it is that you can do to educate yourself, and then write. Write another script. Write until you feel comfortable and you've got something that you feel proud that, you know, you would want to show to somebody. And then reach out, because the world becomes very small when we're all in cyberspace. And people, you never know. There might be a show that is looking for someone with your background experience and storytelling ability that they could add to their staff. There might be a streaming service, you know, a cable place that would love to make a show. You know, they buy formats from other countries all the time and adapt them for television, you know. So you just never know what might happen. But at the core of it, first of all, is feeling like you'll be able to deliver when those doors open. Even if you want to reach out and ask for advice before you write, you could do that too. They just wouldn't be able to read your script to be able to, you know, bring you through the door in that way. Make connections. They always come through other people. People are happy, I find, more or less. Every now and then you'll meet someone who's like having a bad moment or just can't or is too busy. But more often than not, when people can, they're willing to share what they've learned along the way with you.
Yes, as you've been doing today. Let me take the opportunity just to say hello to Mina from Dominica. We also want to say hello to Terrence. Terrence says, I'm enjoying this discussion, Jill and Cassandra. I'm really enthusiastic about this information that I have been able to hear, and it's great for my future. So we're saying to you, Terrence, don't lag, don't sit on it, but be ready. As Jill has advised, you have to be ready when the opportunity presents itself to say, well, listen, this is what I've got. Tell me what to do. So there you go. And I also want to go back here and share a little with you, Jill, from Jody in St. Lucia. Jody had concerns of production costs, and that was a mindset that most stations seem to work with in parts of the region, that they would stick to just a green screen production, more talking heads and news, instead of delving out into the drama or the sitcom, which is something, as I mentioned to you, cost is often a factor, and it limits sometimes what can be done. So I don't know if you want to respond to that or say something on what can be done when you're really working with a tight budget. Sometimes, and I can speak to you from experience, sometimes there is literally no budget, and you have to work off goodwill until you can get a sponsor's interest in making this program go farther. What can you say to Jody? Because Jody seems very adamant and not particularly interested in moving from that position, that there's clear need for a paradigm shift generally.
Yes, well, let me say, first of all, that limitations can actually enhance creativity, because even on shows with budgets, some can have very small budgets. You're on basic cable, that kind of a thing, and you think, I could never make something of quality for that amount, but you can. It forces you to really think about what is at the heart of what you're doing. Also, this time of COVID has produced all these challenges where if you can't have physical production, what can you do with the actors just filming themselves in their own homes? There are very shoestring budget kinds of ways to be able to begin to show what this program could be. And maybe along the way, you're able to pick up funding. Maybe you're able to sell this format somewhere internationally that would be interested in making it. Maybe you're able to tell the whole thing in an entertaining way with just doing it virtually, the ways that some of these shows are being made.
One way to save money.
That's right. Maybe it's, two people in a living room, and, there can be a lot of drama with just one location or two that you're able to have access to. And especially now with people, socially distancing and so forth, there's a lot less being out in the world and having to have these big expensive shoots and locations anyway. So I feel like you can scale things down, perhaps. There are student films, student pilots that are shot that are just a small group of people, coming together to do that. But before you would even do that, you would need the script. So focusing on how you can write scripts in a way that are really centered on character and internal ways that you don't necessarily have to have a lot of budget to be out in the way. You can begin to try to scale it down to get the heart of what you want to say and do. And at a certain point, there will be some budget necessary, but there are different ways of getting to that. And if you have something that's entertaining and dramatic or funny enough that you're able to do, just on an online kind of way, with a small ragtag band of, great things often have humble beginnings.
Good, well said. I want to ask you as well, how important is a name, the title of a show, and should that come first or can it come after you've written?
Either one. Sometimes you just know the title automatically, and then knowing that helps you even develop the show because it's kind of giving you the concept. Other times you have placeholders, but nothing is, you're like, I don't know that that's it. You're kind of settling on something. And then at a certain point, maybe, you land on the thing. It just comes to you when you're not expecting it, or somebody else helps to generate ideas. And sometimes you're just deciding on the best of the ones that you can think about. Other times it may come to you later on in the process. Sometimes you have the title before you have anything else. You don't know what the show is, but that's the title that you're drawn to. Is
it important though?
Well, I think it's what's going to lead the idea when you're sharing it with the outer world, outside world. So I think definitely a great title can capture people's attention, can give them a sense of what the show could be, give it kind of an energy, to it. So I think it is important because it's what people are hearing, when they're first getting to know what the series is.
Some things jumped out at me and will stand, or rather will stay with me, even in my work, that, you have to present yourself and you have to be ready for opportunity. And you never know when it's going to come. You shouldn't doubt yourself. You need to share it. You need to be aware of what you put out there, and you need to be aware of the spaces that you're putting your creative work into. And you need to look at all the opportunities that are available on the social media platforms. You need to protect your work as well, and associate yourself with people who are perhaps of like mind or aware, or have similar goals, so that you can share together. And you need to seek out the expertise. You need to check out the things that you love, so that can continue to fuel your goals. I said all of that so you can say those are my things, but I want you to give us a summary of today and what you hope this will inspire our viewers across the Caribbean to do in their creative spaces and with our stories.
Yes, and what you're speaking about really speaks to that age-old marriage of art and commerce. It's show and it's business. It's both of those things. So there are all the things we talked about that have to do, in particular with writing here, about, what stories you're telling, how you tell those stories, how you conceive of a show, all the creative content. Then there are the business aspects of, where it could air, who might you sell it to, what is the business model, what is the funding and the budget. And both of those pieces, are necessary in the business of television. And if you're lacking one or the other, it can hinder things, right? And what's often said is required of writers here, good scripts on time. Like when you're writing for a show, it needs to be good, and you need to be able to deliver on time, on budget, because that's helping the business aspect. With the more personal aspects, which are at the heart of everything, it's to understand, as I came to learn through my process, that I would say it's a process of co-creation of our path. We're doing our part, and then something is stepping forward to meet us that helps us. But you must take that first step forward. And to your listener early, I think it was Terrence earlier who was talking about, like this is making him, giving someone hope. What you're drawn to, pay attention to it. So many people are trying to figure out, what do I love? What do I want to do? They're so mired in just the business of life that they can't pull back and really think, like, what is it that I'm excited about? And then explore down that path. Learn more about writing scripts, read scripts, go deeper into the thing that you're drawn to. There's a reason you're drawn to it. There's something in you that's lit up in that. And you can take steps to move things forward. And it's not, like I always say, the present is not a map of the future. Everything won't be exactly how it is in this moment. It's dynamic and evolving, just like our world, just like our society right now. When you shift and change, other things shift and change that can come into the picture that can then support you going forward. Just like in the course of a script, you meet fortuitous people along the way, pivotal characters who will help you, a way shower, which is very much a conceit.
I like that.
Think of the Matrix. The Oracle is the one who shows Neo the way. You have wise people who will cross your path, who help you in this moment or that. So you have the power to create, your path in a way that is different from how it is in this moment. And if this is what speaks to you, go for it. Because had I not taken those steps, I would still have a very fulfilling life being a public defender, but I wouldn't have been able to do the work that I've been able to do as a writer, to be able to connect to the world in a way that I wasn't able to do before. So you never know what is possible. I didn't know anyone or anything about this industry, the television industry, before I began. All this unfolded in the pathway. So that is another reason why I like to share it and tell my story and encourage people, because it shows what's possible for all of us.
In the couple of minutes we have remaining, I'll share Mina Archibald's comment. She says the Caribbean is loaded with writers and producers, but the opportunities available to our people in the creative arts, and more specifically films and TV productions, have not been realized to their full potential. Also, so few international movies, music videos, and advertisements have been filmed in the Caribbean, but we are stuck with American TV. And to be fair, after all, this is like the Mecca. The U.S. has been seen as the Mecca for TV productions. For years, we've thought of LA as the place to go if you want to meet and see the stars. And so, to be fair, I mean, that's where the production has been going on through the golden age and to now. But the fact of the matter is that the rest of the world, there have been great developments. We've seen Nollywood, in Africa, lots of movies are being produced. In India, you're seeing movies being produced. In the region, as I said earlier, we're seeing more films, and I think we're seeing that's a good thing. And people are showcasing, as far as Cannes, some of our local people. So we have to note those little strides, but I get what Mina's saying. We need to see more of that. So I leave you to comment as well. This will be our final comment. And thank you, Rochelle. That's one of my former colleagues. She says one of my major talents is naming shows. I am very good at that. Thank you, Rochelle. So go ahead and share your comments on what Mina had to say.
Yes, and I agree with what she's saying. Like, one of the great things about speaking on behalf of American Film Showcase and going all over the world to speak to people who are interested in learning about what is the U.S. system of television, what are some tips for writing and strategies for writing and creating characters. Spoken to writers in Pristina, Kosovo, and Amman, Jordan. Everyone wants to be telling their stories, to gear up their industry, to be able to put more of their content out, and that can be a challenge for the host locations. They need to begin developing those industries, but one way to begin doing that is to hear more about it in other places, and also to begin creating the scripts and the content that if you could get production going, you'd be able to film. And in success, perhaps more opportunities are generated, and an economic model that is sustainable can emerge from that. So I would say, don't be discouraged. Like when we feel limitation, you have to find a way around that. Either, you create a different model, or you find a different way to tell your story, or you put out content in a different way as it begins to evolve and develop. The U.S. industry didn't begin like this overnight. It's been an evolutionary process. Everything is changing more. There's so many content delivery places, so many streaming places, different lengths of programs coming through. I feel like we're in a real evolution in all ways in our culture and civilization. So hopefully this will mean that more people can get their voices heard and their stories told.
1 minute. I know we're a little bit, we're running out of time. 1 minute. Do you feel like what you've just said has challenged you in the way you write for TV? All the changes, has it challenged the process?
Yes, I feel that it's opened up more opportunities to do that, and it's taken content ideas from being more general to being very specific. It's opened up writers' rooms in a way. Like when I began, I was in some cases the only woman on a staff, and now not so much anymore. It definitely needs to improve, and hopefully it is improving. But I feel that challenges are just in figuring out what are all the new paradigms, what are the ways we can maximize our stories in these ways, What are the economic models? What are ways that writers are able to make a sustainable living? If we have shorter seasons, then are we locked in and we don't have the opportunity to work and make the same kind of income? There's all kinds of growing pains and things to address as different models change. But part of it is always story. And I feel like one really good aspect about it all is it's the opportunity for more story.
Jill, this has been an absolute pleasure, and we don't have enough time to cover everything, but I think we've covered a lot. We've started conversations, and you've pointed out a number of resources that people can tap into online, and I hope that they will do that. And just in case anybody wants to know, are you on Instagram? Are you on social media? How can you be reached?
Yes, I haven't been doing that right now, but in the near future, I will be, and I can keep you updated.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. This has been the final in the three-part series of the U.S. Embassy's American Film Showcase, the virtual workshops. They've been happening right here. So wherever you are, you could have tapped in. We want to thank you for joining us across the region and right here in Barbados for this session, which of course focused very much so on the United States television industry and your opportunity to take away from this expert what you can. We've been chatting with Envoy Jill Goldsmith. Thank you so very much, Jill, for spending this time with us.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. And I want to hear everyone's story, so I hope to do that in the future.
Thanks also to our host, the United States Embassy here at Bridgetown, and of course with special interest in the continued development of communities across the Caribbean. Thanks so much. I'm Cassandra Crawford. Have a great afternoon and go after your goals. Be ready to receive the opportunities. Bye-bye. Until next time.